Good evening, everybody, or good morning, or good night, whichever it is for you. This 12 gauge. I'm here back on part two of addiction versus myth. I'm trying to make the correlation between the Idaho 4 case and the individuals that are participants in this case. I may not get through presenting everything I want to present this stream, so there might be a part three. I want to tell you that everything that I talk about is factual. I try to look up information or videos that are just not hearsay, but that are based on actual scientific data or research that is credible. Most of the things that come out of my mouth, if they are hypothetical or there is a hypothesis based on what I say, I speak that. I don't create a theory that is unfounded. So, addiction versus myth, part two. I wanted to show this little video about how dopamine is released and how dopamine is, excuse me, how dopamine is the pleasure carrier that tells your brain, hey, I like this. Let's continue to do this. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with this little video. This video is presented by Neuroscientific Call. So I'm giving them credit on this video. So let's go ahead and begin.
Where I explain neuroscience topics in 2 minutes or less. In this installment, I will discuss dopamine. Dopamine is a monoamine neurotransmitter, a term that refers to its chemical structure and the fact that it is derived from an amino acid. Dopamine is also a catecholamine, a term that also refers to its chemical structure and the fact that it contains a catechol nucleus. To synthesize dopamine, the amino acid tyrosine is converted to L-dopa. Then L-dopa is decarboxylated to form dopamine.
Okay, so basically, he gave the chemical breakdown of what dopamine is and what it does and how it's broken down. Well, let me give it more of a layman's term and then we'll get back to the video. I'll talk about the layman's term. So, dopamine release is anything that is spread through the neurotransmitters to give you this sense of pleasure. So let's say that you eat a hamburger for the very first time or you eat a slice of pizza. And the fact that you enjoy that, it tells the brain to release dopamine and it tells it to release oxytocin, tells it to release serotonin, tells it to release I can't think right now what the last one is. I'll think about it here in a second. But anyways, your body tells these enzymes to be released because you're enjoying what it is that you're eating. Okay. So the next time that you start craving something, have you ever told somebody, hey, I'm craving some pizza or I'm craving a hamburger? Well, that craving has been brought up because something triggered your brain to think about that craving because you've had a pizza before, you've had a hamburger before. Maybe you smelt it. Maybe you drove by a restaurant that was advertising it. Maybe somebody posted a video and you saw a hamburger that looked delicious, so your mouth started watering. That's the dopamine being sent to the pleasure center, which is the limbic system, and telling it, hey, we want some of this. We want and need some of this. So therefore, it's kind of like I tell my clients, I say, it start the Jumanji drum, that dum, 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 dum. That is the craving, that is the feeling, that Jumanji drum going off. And most of the time, if you've ever been an individual with an addictive mindset, you're unable to break that until you go and get it. And it could be anything. It could be food, it could be gambling, it could be sex, it could be even drugs and alcohol, cigarettes, anything that changes the way you feel. And when we're talking about drugs and alcohol, we're talking about an unconscious trigger that many people don't even realize they possess. This trigger, as I just stated, could be based on you smelling it, you seeing it, or even being in an old area where you once bought it. And unfortunately, what happens is you start craving, that drum starts beating in your head. And and unfortunately, this is where addicts use the term jonesing, because they can't seem to break the drum beats in their head until they go and complete the cycle. Let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the dopamine, and then I'll continue with my statements.
The hypothalamus, olfactory bulb, and retina. There are several major dopamine pathways that carry dopamine from these areas of concentration to other parts of the brain. Some of the largest are the mesostriatal or nigrostriatal pathway, which stretches from the substantia nigra to the striatum, the mesolimbic pathway, which stretches from the ventral tegmental area to the nucleus accumbens and other limbic structures, and the mesocortical pathway, which stretches from the ventral tegmental area throughout the cerebral cortex. Dopamine acts at G protein coupled receptors, and there are at least 5 subtypes of the dopamine receptor. Dopamine is removed from the synaptic cleft by a transporter protein called the dopamine transporter. Like any neurotransmitter, the functions of dopamine are complex and can't be fully explained with just a short summary. Dopamine is linked to movement due to disorders like Parkinson's disease that involve dopamine deficiencies. It is also often associated with the processing of rewarding experiences. However, dopamine also plays a role in many other functions.
Okay, so I don't know what's going on with the internet. Seems to be lagging, and it's annoying when I'm trying to present a video. But basically, the dopamine is released through the neurotransmitter. And if you can imagine there being one on this side, one on this side, one on this side, one on this side. So the dopamine is released between both of these, which is called the synaptic cleft. Basically, it's released, this one uptakes it. So when you're doing drugs or alcohol, what happens is, like with marijuana, it when the dopamine being released, the marijuana somehow blocks the reuptake, so the dopamines are floating around until they die off. The same thing with cocaine and methamphetamine. On this side, since there's so many dopamine that's being released and blocked on this side from reuptaking, this side has to create new ventricles that take the dopamine. So there's so much dopamine with these stimulants that they're uptaked, and eventually they die off because they're not able to come back to this side. And I hope that makes sense in layman's terms. So, as I told you last time, when you were getting involved with downers or opiates, heroin, alcohol, Xanax, things of that sort, Oxycontin. When you're dealing with those, what happens is they block the opiate receptors from feeling any type of pain. So it numbs you out to the point where you're just kind of numb. Some people, when they do heroin, they nod off. If they call it the heroin nod, they nod off. You may go to sleep for a little bit, wake up, go after it again. If someone's doing hydrocodone or Oxycontin, what happens is they could either do the same thing as far as building up a tolerance with these things, the same thing with heroin, of course, or any kind of drug. But what happens is you'll either nod or you'll become hyperactive. You'll kind of go down this. And many addicts they fight through the sleepy or drowsy effect. So it's going down and they're fighting through it and then boom, they get that release, that energy, and they don't stay nodded off because they built up a tolerance to the point where it doesn't affect them that way. And due to the fact of the shelf life of how long it stays in their system, this creates them to be chasing the dragon, so to speak, as I spoke in my last video, where they try to beat the pain by taking whatever it is that they're using. Not a lot has been presented about Mr. Koberger's drug addiction other than, he was addicted to heroin, overweight, obviously, lost a lot of weight, and then, went to rehab, sobered up, and went on his successful journey as a student, and which ultimately led him to where he is today, where he's sitting in a Latah County jail, awaiting a trial for the quadruple homicides. So the last time I was mentioning how drugs and alcohol psychologically change your mindset. We're talking about downers today, okay? So I'm going to stick to heroin, I'm going to stick to alcohol. And there's some more, but I don't have time to really discuss all those. What happens is you take a depressant, it's called a depressant, central nervous system depressant. And what happens is you ingest this and it goes into your central nervous system and it starts shutting things down. Imagine it being like a breaker box. And each one of these breakers controls your heartbeat, your breathing, your visual, your nerves, your feeling, your whatever, all the way through. So you ingest this and it goes through your central nervous system and suppresses these areas. And your body goes into shock and it starts overcompensating for whatever it is that you've ingested, trying to get that foreign object out of your body. So instead of, let's say you drink, instantly 20% of that alcohol is going to go into the large intestine. It's going to filter through the body. It takes an hour and 45 minutes per ounce to be filtered through the liver. So an ounce would be like a shot glass. Okay, that's a shot of alcohol. That's it. So if we're talking about a 12-ounce beverage, 1 ounce is alcohol. The other 11 ounces is water. Okay, because that's how it's transferred through the body. So you drink that beer or you drink that mixed drink, and in an hour and 45 minutes you'll be theoretically sober. Okay? But what happens is, like many times, as I was talking about earlier, is you're chasing the dragon. You're chasing whatever it is that you're trying to change. So you're trying to beat it. So let's say that you've had a hard day, you're at happy hour, you've had one, you already order another one even before you finish that one. So by the time that one is done, this one's already here at the table ready for you to go. So an hour and 45 minutes, you drink another one, you drink another one, you drink another one, you lose count. You're thinking, well, I've just had four. So four times an hour and 45 minutes, whatever that is going to take for your body to filter out this alcohol. So you drink a couple waters, you eat a hamburger, you eat whatever, and you think, "Hey, I'm feeling better." So it's only been an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours. You still have alcohol in your bloodstream. So you go, you get behind the wheel, you get pulled over, they ask you to blow, you refuse, you go down to the station, they ask you to draw blood, they draw blood to give you a DWI because you have so much alcohol per volume in your bloodstream. So you get a DWI. In this aspect, many people they fail to understand this concept because let's take it back to the party house. Let's say that they're partying on Friday, partying on Saturday, and partying on Sunday. Per that hour and 45 minutes, that's just drinking, okay? Let's say they didn't do any cocaine, they didn't do any meth, they didn't do any molly, they didn't do any of that. So cocaine stays in your system 72 hours. Meth is about 3 days. But let's stick to alcohol here. So Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, you're drinking, you're barely sleeping, you're eating that comfort food, pizza, a sandwich, whatever it might be. Theoretically, let's say that you drink at least 5 or 6 hours on a light note. Friday, you get up Saturday, you eat, you do your daily normal activities, start drinking at 4:30, 5 o'clock. You drink until 3 in the morning. So you not only have the drinking from Friday, you have the drinking from Saturday, and then Sunday it's the hair of the dog. So you drink enough to get feeling better, okay? And you say, well, Monday I got to go to school, I got to go to work, whatever. I need to not drink as much. So if you're doing the math, it's going to be Monday, Tuesday, and possibly Wednesday before the alcohol is really totally out of your system. But what happens is, here it is, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, okay? You still have alcohol in your system. So if you got pulled over and they did blood work, you'd have alcohol in your system, maybe not enough to get you a DWI, but maybe a DUI, driving under the influence. So here we are Wednesday. You're in school, you're having a tough week already because Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday you felt like crap. Wednesday, you're like, okay, I'm starting to feel better, blah, blah, blah. Thursday is usually college night, so you go out, 10-cent drinks. So Thursday, you drink till 2, 3 in the morning. Friday, you drink again, Saturday and Sunday. So you're technically never sober very long, if at all. But many people do this and they feel that they don't have a problem with alcohol. And the same thing can hold true with drugs, because you're always chasing that feeling or trying to escape from something that you don't want to feel. So I just gave you two examples, okay? So let's say that Saturday night, the housemates had been partying. They said they had, I mean, I had heard to report that they had a house party the night before, that Friday night, and there was 150 plus people there. 150 plus. So that Friday night they partied. That Saturday night they partied. And early Sunday morning is when the unalivings occurred. So to say that these individuals were completely sober, even they if their functioning was not off, they were not at their best. Okay, they were not clear-headed because alcohol and drugs they slow and inhibit your comprehension, your reflexes. Even when you're sober, you're still not at 100%. So with the alcohol, what happens before you're 26 and the brain, get the functioning capability that you're going to use for the rest of your life, the more you drink, you dehydrate the brain, so it shrinks, and that encompasses all the issues that you have with the functioning. No telling how much these kids actually drank. No telling if they were doing any other kind of illegal substances, which that's their right. They're going to college. They were exhibiting the college experience, so no judgment there. But the part that I really struggle with is when people say, "Well, they'd been partying all night or they've been partying all day." Well, it was parents' weekend too. There was a football game that day, so surely they partied that day. They partied the night before, so I'm pretty certain that their reflexes were not at their best, even if they were sober. Maybe at the grub truck, those two girls, maybe one was inebriated and the other one was sober or hungover and still not at 100% to functioning. There had to be a reason they got a ride share because had one of them drove, they might have got a DWI based on the fact that they were not 100%. And there's the other two that came from a party across the way. So no telling how much alcohol or other substances were in their bodies, or when they had last drank and how clean and sober they really were. Nobody knows until the autopsy reports are released in trial, if there was actually something more in there or something less. But what I'm trying to tell you is this: many times individuals focus on one event. Well, they were at the corner club, they were at the Sigma Chi party, they were at the grub truck, they were here, they were there, but you didn't see them drinking. Maybe because they didn't feel all that great. Maybe they weren't drinking. Maybe they were popping pills, you know? So, another characteristic of drinking or excessive alcohol ingestion is you tend to lose weight because you stop eating as much because it's a depressant. So it depresses your appetite, it depresses a lot of things in your body, and you stop eating. You stop. It's kind of like when you're smoking weed. That's a depressant as well. So when you hear people say, "Well, I have to smoke weed in order to eat," because what it does, it triggers the chemical composition in the brain that tells you, "Hey, you're hungry, go eat." That's why they call it the munchies. So whether these individuals were ingesting certain chemicals or whether they were just social drinking or whatever it was, I'm trying to base facts on placing them in their last 3 nights or so of living because you don't know where their mind was, whether their mind was already at the point where they were struggling cognitively, they were struggling with distorted realities because that's what happens. You get into arguments with people because you perceive everything as a threat when you're in that mindset. So let's get back to Mr. Koberger and something that I said in the other video regarding love and sex addiction. You know, when they talk about Mr. Koberger, they act like he was just one dimensional. Like he was just a college student, that's all he was. Like he didn't have any other hang-ups. He was just a college student. He boxed, he ran, he was a vegan. That's it. That's Mr. Koberger. Well, you and I know more in our reasoning ability to know that he was made up of more of this, more than that. Surely he craved affection as all humans do. He craved belonging like all humans do. He craved approval like all humans do. So that's being stated. Mr. Koberger was probably in a very small circle of individuals. He either had his friends over at WSU or he had developed some friendships at Moscow. Maybe he had developed some relationships in that household. Maybe he wanted some relationships in that household. And it just didn't transpire. Or maybe he was given false hope regarding where it was going to go. It's kind of like, you get loaned a Porsche for the weekend and you get used to being around it, feeling important, this, that, and the other. And then on Monday, they give you, the Ford Taurus back and say, here, this is yours to drive from here on out. It's going to frustrate you. Will it frustrate you enough to make you want to kill? Who knows? It might some people, but we're talking about Brian Koberger, who I don't know, and you don't know. There's been other serial killers that killed for less. They did it for excitement. They did it because they felt humanity had no real need for existence. One more thing before I close up this video. One thing that people focus on is the fact that he was a criminology student, that he was going toward his PhD. I'm a criminology student right now. I'm not going toward my PhD. I'm just getting my bachelor's. So I'm very early in it. And I can tell you that if you get fixated on crime, now I'm not talking about gradual fixation like the true crime community is. I'm talking about obsessive, where it's feeding a need for you that you've never identified before. It's your happiness, it's your new drug, it's your existence, it's your importance, it's your feeling of belonging, acceptance, approval. This individual could have became very supreme minded to the point where everything he wanted after the fact, he felt that obligation to manifest in his reality, including one of the roommates, if they were the key, they were the target. Because once you achieve success and people are hailing your name and calling your name and saying how brilliant you are, where you're trying to hide the heroin addict in the back of the room, where you're trying to hide your inadequacies in the back of the room and have them just fixate on what everybody is fixated on now. He's a criminology student. He's so smart. He's brilliant. He's this. He knows that. You know what? They teach you theory. They teach you investigative theory. They teach you criminal law. They teach you the U.S. court. They teach you a lot of things as tools that you're going to use in your career. Sure, you learn about serial killers, but you don't learn to become one. And sure, on the investigative parts, you're going to know how to get past the crime scene. But like I said, unless that's your deviancy, most people are just going to be like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. That's cool. But if that's your deviancy, you're going to focus on that. You know, he could have focused on it. I'm not saying he didn't, but it could have been his deviancy where it became his downfall. Because instead of being a drug addict that was fixated on mentally destroying himself, physically destroying himself, emotionally destroying himself, spiritually destroying himself, he picked up another avenue of abuse. And you say, well, how can you abuse yourself through knowledge? Well, it's easy. You become so fixated, like some people do on these platforms, that that's all you talk about. That's all you're about. That's all you do. Every day you're on different panels talking about certain things. I wonder if some of you actually take the time to live a life that is not about this Idaho 4 case. It may look like I make a video every day because I'm fixated, but I'm not. I have a life out here, and I don't think about this case all the time unless a white Elantra happened to pull out in front of me or a red Mustang, because I've learned how to differentiate reality from fiction. For a lot of people, this is a fiction novel that they are reading as it unfolds, trying to guess the ending. This is for human beings that lost their lives. This is for human beings that have families that have to go on with the tragedy that befell them. This is a university where their friends, if they still go there, have to continue on, even through the laughter, through the pain, through whatever. They still have to continue to live. If you've ever lost somebody that you cared about or even loved, you understand the grieving process. Just because I can smile does not mean that my heart is healed. So to be so fixated that you must be right at all costs, or you must throw out the newest, I call it hypothesis because it's not a theory or speculation, your obsession has become your drug of choice. Are you neglecting your family because of it? Are you neglecting your job? Are you neglecting yourself? Hell, I've seen some creators where people were like, man, you look like you haven't slept in days. And they're like, yeah, you're right, I haven't. Because I've been doing this and that and the other on creating new videos. That's insane. Because the video is not going to solve the case. A hypothesis is not going to make you important unless you can continue to be proficient in your area of investigation. Now, I can talk about addiction and relate it to anything. I just did that. And I could keep going with the addictive cycle because there's more to it, and I probably will in my next video. But I urge you to please take care of yourselves. You know, if you feel that your mental health is draining or dwindling, or you're just not yourself, I suggest that you go get some help somewhere. In case of an emergency, please call 911. All this stuff is not that important. Unplug. Give yourself a hobby that does not include negative outcomes. Because the way you view your world is how you treat your world. If you view your world as needing the most graphic, murderous details, then chances are your world is very negative, dark, and twisted, and you don't trust anybody or anything. This world is different than we've ever known it, but still a beautiful world if you look for it. So try to take care of each other. Take care of your families. They need you. You can start saving people in your own vicinity rather than trying to find justice for people you don't even know. Because once this case is over, are you still going to be trying to find justice as if you knew these kids? Are you going to carry on with this saga until you pass away? This is your reason for living? Please, please take a look at your lives. And I'm not saying anything against anybody because I don't know you. But I'm just suggesting as a professional that if things are getting out of control and people are telling you, hey, you need to unplug, you might take a look at that. You might even get help because there could be a reenactment being triggered by some kind of video that creates your mind to start traumatically reacting the same trauma over and over and over. Well, that's all I have for tonight. I'm gonna get out of here. I hope you guys like it. Hope you guys comment. I don't have a lot of comments. I don't have a lot of likes, and that's fine with me. I'm about getting the information out. I'm not about getting popular. If it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, I still love myself without the popularity of YouTube. God bless you all. Good night.